mason jar inside. We're gonna take that stock pot, we're gonna throw it onto our stovetop, half on our burner and half off. So let's say this is our burner right here. Only a portion of our stock pot is gonna be on the burner, the rest is gonna be on the side, so it's off of the actual heat. We're gonna be cooking with residual heat and steam. So we're gonna fill the stock pot with about 2 cups of water. We're gonna take that mason jar that I mentioned earlier, fill it with our liquid butter, melted butter. We're gonna break up our cannabis, our raw flour, into that butter. Do not use a grinder. When you use a grinder, you're gonna lose a percentage right out the gate because you're gonna have those trichomes drop down, your keef is gonna drop down, and you're gonna already have a gauge loss before you even start. So we're gonna break it up by hand, seal up the jar, put it into our stock pot with water on a low-medium heat. We want to keep the temperatures between 180 and 200 degrees, the water. And whatever the water temperature is, that's the same temperature that's going to be in the jar. We're going to put the jar on the side of the pot that's not on the heat, not on the stove burner. So we're cooking again with residual heat and steam. It's going to help maintain the nutrients, and it's going to help prevent any kind of overactivation or overcooking with your cannabis. And again, our temperatures are going to be 180 to 200 degrees, and we're going to keep it on the stove for roughly 4 hours. Every hour or so, open the pot. We are going to have a lid on our pot. Open the pot, pull your jar out. Do not open it because terpenes are aromatic, so you could have a chance to lose. It'll dissipate out. So you pull it out, use a hot pad. I'll roll up some paper towels and pull it out, and then just give it a good shake for a minute. That way it breaks up anything that wasn't hand broken up, helps absorb all those cannabinoids, and then put it back in your stock pot, cover it up. We're gonna do it roughly 3 to 4 times throughout the 4-hour cooking process. Once we finish that process, we're going to pull it off the stovetop. I personally run mine around 3.5 hours, and I let it cool for that last half hour, because during the cooling process, it is still cooking, meaning that cannabinoids are still activated. I'll pull it out of the hot water, I'll turn the stove off, and then pull it out and let it cool on the countertop for the last 30 minutes of that 4 hours. The reason I do that, I like to leave some of my cannabinoids inactive, so when I make my butters, my brownies, my baked goods, my breads, anything that I'm going to make with it, it's not going to overactivate during that next cooking process. It'll either fully activate or it'll stay at a good level where I have a little minute amount inactive, so I get a true full spectrum from that strain. And even as an inactive cannabinoid or an acidic cannabinoid, it's still going to give you certain effects. So THC compared to THCA, THC is already activated. You're going to get that euphoria, plus your pain relief, a little muscle relaxation, some munchies and things like that. With your THCA, so when you leave a little not activated, you're still going to get muscle relaxation and pain relief, maybe a little bit of hunger, but you're not going to get that full euphoria from that cannabinoid. It'll help with relieving the pain and all that without getting that bad high.
Thank you. Hi guys. Sorry you're doing a meeting.
You're good.
Bible study.
Once we pull it off the stove and we've let it cool, we get the temperature under 125. Most of your terpenes are activated after 155 degrees. So at 125 degrees and below, the terpenes have absorbed back into the butter. These terpenes are aromatic. So once you get that absorption back into the butter with your terpenes and everything, and it's cooled enough, we'll take the butter and our flour mixture, throw it through some cheesecloth so we can strain out all that plant matter. And then at the end of that, we're going to cool it and kind of mix it as it cools. Because as we all know, if we melt butter and then we let it solidify, you get milk fats on the bottom, butter fats on the top. Your milk fats are going to absorb roughly 80% of your cannabinoids due to the fat concentration in comparison to the 20% absorption for your butter fats. Now, the reason we mix it is so we get a proper dosing, an even dosing throughout the entire batch of butter. So even if 100% absorption and not the differential for the 80 to 20% ratio. With that going on, if there's any questions on it, there is proper dosing in the book. A quick thing, you can find it on my YouTube. It'll be 25% example, 25% THC multiplied by 10 will give you 250 milligrams per gram, and we will be going over that plus gauge loss at 2 o'clock to 2:10. If anybody has any questions for me about the butter infusion, let me know.
Yeah, question. So you talked earlier about like using a grinder versus using your hands. So I've like done it both ways, and when I use my hands, I feel like, and I haven't like studied this at all, but when I use my hands, I feel like all the trichomes just like get stuck to my hands instead of getting stuck onto the grinder. And with like the grinder, you can
still
dump the
you
keef.
lose a little bit. Now, if you're undoing your keef area, dumping all your keef and doing a full spray, you could use a grinder. It's a little more tedious work. With the hands, it's going to be a lot less of a loss.
And so what about like gloves? Like what about like those little like plastic kind of glove things? Do you think that would help better than the hands? Or like
When I actually use gloves for mine, the latex non-powder. Sometimes I'll use the non-latex. I'll get less, depending on the strain, the stickiness, and freshness, I'll get less stuck to my gloves than I do to my fingers and my pores. So yes, I would recommend using the gloves. It'll be the least amount of loss you're going to get when you're breaking it up. But a grinder is always going to give you the most because it's shaking it up, breaking it all down. And unless you're scraping it all out and being really tedious with it, you're going to have a heavier loss on that. And we will go over gauge loss as well during all the infusions at the next class from 2 to 2:10. All right. Love, peace, and cannabis, everybody. Keep those smiles growing and the positive energy flowing. Thanks for tuning in.